Good morning, New Hope. Pastor Christy here. Last time in our devotional, we talked about how God has told his children that he will provide food for them, even though they don't ask in a very polite way. They're complaining and accusing him of trying to kill them. So here we see God is infinitely patient with them. He says, I will provide bread for you from heaven. Well, growing up, I heard of this. They called it manna because they didn't know what else. It was something they had never seen before. And so the word manna actually means, what is it? So they looked out and they said, what is it? He told them that after the dew had fallen in the morning, they were to go outside and they were to collect this off the ground. Now, they describe it as being white, like a colander seed. And it tastes, when they cooked it, they could boil it or they could grind it up and make it into a bread or like a wafer. And it tasted like a wafer made with honey. Now you have to remember, in the ancient world, they didn't use sugar like we did. Honey was the sweetest thing that they really had. And they used it in a lot of their cooking, especially the nobles. So in Egypt, we know that a lot of the mummies actually had bad teeth because they ate a lot of honey. Kind of like us sometimes today, we eat so much sugar, we can mess with our teeth. Well, the Egyptians had the same issue. So here, God is actually giving the slaves something that would be the closest thing to candy that we can imagine. And he gives them, lets it fall in the morning. So I always thought, okay, so it's like a wafer made with honey, so maybe it's a cake about that size, right? No, it's not. I looked at the measurement that was given for every person. They were given a certain amount they were allowed to collect per person in their household. So they were given an omer. That's not a measurement we use nowadays. So I looked it up a little bit. It would come to an equivalent of this. This is a grain. It's a similar white color. And this is 8 cups of grain. Now, that is a lot, obviously, but if I were to grind that up and make it into bread, like I will later, I would end up with not just a 2-pound loaf like what you would buy in the store. I would end up with 3 pounds of bread. Now, that would be in a loaf of bread and another half of a loaf. And this was what was allowed for one person for just one day. It was really crazy because if I try to eat my bread, I can't eat an entire loaf in a day. Now, my family can, if my whole family is eating it, but this was just for one person. I can maybe eat 2 or 3 slices in a day, but not an entire loaf and a half. So here they were allowed basically 3 pounds of grain per person per day. God is being very generous with them. Not only that, but God sends quail every evening so that they have meat, because they're complaining, oh, when I was in Egypt, I had bread every day and I sat around a pot of meat every night. That's what the Pharaoh gave us. But God is much more generous than the Pharaoh, and he's not beating you every day. Imagine that as something to be grateful for. So here, they're given this amazing amount of grain. But some of the people, they wanted to gather up enough grain. They were worried that the next day the grain wouldn't fall and God wouldn't provide for them. And so God told them very specifically, you're only allowed to collect enough for one person for one day. Don't collect more than that. But some people ignored the advice or the command, and they went and they would fill the entire thing full. They would collect 2 omers for every person because they're afraid that maybe God isn't going to provide for them the next day. Again, they're not trusting God, which is really what this comes down to. So if they collected more at the end of the day, the next day they would look in their jars and they would find maggots, and they would find the grain had actually rotted. It was only good for one day during the week. Monday through Friday, until Friday evening, it was only good for one day. Now, the 7th day is a little bit different, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the main thing was God wanted them to know, I'm giving you your daily bread. This is for you for every day. I want you to know that I'm going to take care of you tomorrow. So I don't want you collecting extra. I don't want you stockpiling this. because there's a point in time for stockpiling. Yes, there is. But the problem is the children of Israel had been in the slavery mentality where they hadn't been cared well for. And God is trying to get into their heads, I'm not like Pharaoh. I'm not going to use you and drop you. I am your loving Heavenly Father. I am your leader. I am your king. I am your defender. All you need is just enough for today, and I'm going to provide for you tomorrow. A lot of times I think we get needs and wants confused. What do I need? I need my daily bread. I need enough that nutritionally I'm satisfied. Is that what I want? No, I want a buffet with dessert every night. After every meal, I want ice cream. I want cake. But that's not what I need. Does my family need 2 cars? It's really helpful. But I know families who go with just 1 car. What is it that we need versus what we want? It's really tricky sometimes because we're in a culture that tells you need something. Need is just enough to satisfy your basic needs. A roof over your head, clothes to wear so you're not naked, right? Friends and family for emotional support. But we want so much more. And the thing with wants is it's a moving finish line. If you ask anybody how much more money they need to be satisfied, right? Even millionaires and billionaires will tell you just a little more. The thing is, God needs to be the place we look to, the person we look to fill our wants, not our needs. And God is so gracious, He satisfies our wants a lot of times. He fills us with good things. But we can get so dissatisfied when we're seeking after our wants, when we're seeking after our pleasure, instead of just our needs. So I would like to challenge you to look at what you need and thank God for that. But don't forget to thank Him for when He gives you just what you want. He goes above and beyond, and we can be so entitled and say, well, of course He gives me that. I'm a good person. There is no reason for Him to give us our wants. And sometimes it might be a good idea to cut back on our wants a little bit to remember what we really need. Fasting is a good example of that, where we cut back a little bit on some kind of a pleasure or some kind of even a food to see what our actual wants and needs and to start to distinguish between those lines, because the lines get really fuzzy. We'll talk about Sabbath next time, and we'll talk about how God provided something for them they didn't realize that they needed.